At Council Bluffs Savings Bank, our goal is to help you, your families, and your businesses grow and prosper for generations. We take pride in our community, whether it's volunteering our time or helping individuals, families, and businesses succeed. We provide you with the personal service and attention you deserve. With over 220 years of banking experience, decisions are made locally. We are Council Bluffs people operating at Council Bluffs Bank to help Council Bluffs be a better place to work and live. Council Bluffs Savings Bank, hometown banking, the way it used to be. Member FDIC.
Happened in regards to Hanford's River's Edge Park. And Ron Teacup's here today to talk a little bit about that. I got it this far, I hope I don't break it before I get it. Every year, the American Council of Engineering Companies Iowa chapter has an awards program to go through, and we submitted the Tom Hannafin River's Edge Park as a design award for the use of the filtration systems, the biofilters, and the grasses, and just all things in the design of the park, working with the Corps of Engineers through the levee and things. It was HGM Associates and Sasaki out of Boston, and we won the honor award this past year for 2013. And so we got it early this year, and we decided rather than just give you a plaque, we put together a little shadow box. And, you know, I'll give this to you. I'm going to give it to Larry Foster, but he's not here yet since it was a city park project. But we apply for these every few years or so, depending on the project and stuff. And so we'll give this for Larry to hang in his office or wherever you guys want to put it. But just wanted to present it at the city council meeting. That's all I'm here for.
That's
so.
cool.
Thank you.
I'll sit down, so it's out of my hands now. I'll give it to Lynn. She doesn't break anything.
It's not bone, so it's safe.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. The second item on the agenda was discussion in regards to the rental housing inspection program, I assume is what it's in regards to. Did somebody want to lead it off? Or we'd have Steve, and maybe we'll have Steve give you a little narrative, but as you know, we had Steve look into it, what the associated costs would be if we went a full inspection. And so, Steve, you want to?
Thank you, Mayor. I really didn't know exactly what you wanted me to present to you tonight, so I've kind of put together some ideas and some notes with regard to the issue at hand. First, I'd like to thank the council for taking an opportunity just to evaluate this program. As you know, the City of Council Bluffs is on a passive program for inspection whereby we self-certify our rental units rather than inspect them and issue certificates of compliance for them. We all know that in the last 5 years we've had 5 deaths in fires. 4 of those were in unregistered rental property in the city, which means nobody knew that they were there until we had the fire. In 2014 we had 1,124 landlords registered property with the city, and the total registered units for that year were 9,480. During the time when the City of Council Bluffs did the Project Alex program, the fire department went out and installed smoke detectors in 2 neighborhoods. One's Tinley Park, and the other one passes my mind right now. But one of the oddities that we found in that program is there were 14% of the properties that we showed through the Potawatomi County records that were most likely rental properties that were not registered with the City of Council Bluffs. And I'm going to use that percentage point in a little bit farther down the line. So what we did, in talking with different members of the council over the last 3 years, and Mayor Hannafin, they wanted me to go out and gather information and look at other inspection programs throughout the state of Iowa and find out exactly what they did. So we used 10 cities in Iowa: Iowa City, Marshalltown, West Des Moines, Davenport, Muscatine, Fort Dodge, Burlington, Cedar Rapids, Ames, and the city of Des Moines, and evaluated their fee structures. And I talked to some of the folks in those towns to find out exactly how they ran their programs and what fees they charged to pay for an active inspection program rather than a passive inspection program. And what we found was that the average cost of those 10 cities per unit was about $56.50 a year to register their units so that they could go out and have their inspectors inspect them. So taking the the amount of registered units that we have, 9,480, and assuming that we have a 14% non-registered category in there, that's about 11,000, give or take a few, rental units that we potentially could have in the city. That might be multifamily dwellings, probably mostly single-family dwellings. And the way inspections typically work out, we're probably going to end up somewhere in the area of 19 to 20,000 inspections a year to do those, which we're not going to be able to do. So part of the process we looked at is a lot of jurisdictions had 1, 2, 3, 4-year timeframes where they went through their entire city and evaluated all types of structures that were rental properties, whether they were multifamily down to single family. And one of the things that we found when I presented a memo to Mayor Hannon and the council in 13 was we thought we had about 9191 for the rental units that were registered that year, and based on our fee schedule today, that would have generated $146,000. There's another fee schedule that I'm going to bring to you to evaluate. By no means is that something that I think is static. I just based that off of what the other 10 cities had done, and there was a few things in there that I thought were pertinent and germane to the issue. I'm going to pass this around to you today. This is something that we got Thursday. This was a rental unit that was registered, self-certified as compliant, and this is the condition in the house today in 9 months, excuse me. I tend to believe this is tenant generated. If I owned the rental property, I would certainly have wanted to have been in there to evaluate this property, but this is the typical thing that we see on the harder end of what we do. And some of that's confidential, so please, if I could have that back when we're done.
This is just one copy that you want us to look at?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. We've issued several citations during the last, I'm going to say 3 to 4 months to individuals who we've found are running non-registered rental programs.
That's a question. Is
Yes,
this
ma'am.
mold?
Those are roaches. The house was infested with roaches, lice, scabies,
Oh, my God.
and they pulled 4 children out of the house, and they issued some citations for child neglect. It was a really bad situation. But we've issued several citations during the last few months to unregistered rentals, and whatever and wherever this program goes, if we stay the same or if we move towards an active program, I would really hope that the council and the citizens would look at this as a way to focus more on the unregistered rentals and the problem rental or landlord properties that we have in town. Unfortunately, you can't just single people out and do that. You need to establish a baseline through evaluation of the entire rental program rental program. And then the individuals that are good landlords, and I'm going to tell you folks, the great preponderance of the landlords we have in this town are honest, hardworking, good landlords. They're not bad people. They run a good business. They strive to maintain their properties in good working order, and they don't cause us very many problems at all. We do have an occasional complaint that comes in. Typically, it's when somebody's got an eviction notice and they want to cause the landlord problem, but that happens. And those folks, if we do choose to increase our fees, I would implore you to look at a reduction of the fees for people that are compliant, because they're not the problem. And really, the problem that we're looking at resolving is the housing that is substandard or completely deficient. So after I went through and evaluated the issues that the council asked me to look at over the last few years, and I've really come up, if we're going to go to an active program, I think there's 8 points that I would really like you to consider. We need a very active media campaign, something that we can go through and through the media express to the citizens and to the landlords of this city what your goal as the council and what their goal as the citizens are for the housing in this community. I think it can be a very good positive for the city, but there could be negative implications if we do this wrong. So we really need to do this right if we're going to do that. I apologize terribly.
Thanks for coming in.
Should I duck?
It's getting to be duck season. Secondly, we're going to have to rewrite Chapter 17 and create a very clear and concise ordinance that applies to whatever we choose to do as a city to go from a passive to an active program. And if you give us the direction, I will work with Mr. Reeder and Mr. Wade to provide a document to you that incorporates what the council wants, what the community wants, and what we as staff feel is probably an appropriate thing to do. Implementation, once we get to the point where we have established ordinances, the property maintenance code we adopt every 3 years, so that's not going to change. That's the doctrine that we use in this city to provide minimum housing code criteria. That won't change. What will change is we'll have to hire staff, and to me, after doing a time motion study on it, I believe that in a 3 to 4 year period with 3 inspectors, we should be able to cover the entire city and provide good quality inspections for them, not just random walk in, walk out, and you're done. That's not the goal that I would expect of my staff, nor would I expect of the city of Council Bluffs. So that would be a permit section and 2 field inspectors. I would like to divide the city up into quadrants so that I have inspectors that stay in those areas. And I've had my staff provide a map, if you choose to come in the next day or two, of all of the areas in town where we have had code violations that Maureen Eiler, our housing inspector, has been in. And predominantly, it goes from McPherson west and incorporates a lot of the area around Manawa, Twin City, in that area. Very few that we have are east of McPherson. So those are the areas that we would predominantly tend to stay in. Now, that being said, as we go through this whole process, there'll be legal requirements for getting into houses, but we will have to augment our normal inspection schedule to incorporate the complaints that come in, because if we get complaints, those have to be a high priority for us. Those are, for whatever reason, those are these situations that are the things that I think are get bumped up to the top as far as a daily inspection schedule. The one thing I've heard constantly, Carl, I'm going to use your name because you've brought this up to me on numerous occasions, rental housing versus minimum housing. There's been a large discussion amongst myself and the landlords about the landlords paying for housing inspection. And if I went to Matt's house and inspected Matt's house, that is not a rental house inspection. That is a minimum housing inspection. We use the same code, but that's what that is. When I inspect one of Carla's homes, that is a rental housing inspection. So it's a semantic difference, but it nonetheless is something that I think that the landlords feel they're paying for other housing inspection. And I don't see that that's possible, because the taxpayers are paying for the staff in my office at this point. So it's all public money. It's coming from a different source. But I am cognizant of the terminology and the use of that terminology. Budgeting, I will talk in a second about my thoughts on costs. Documentation of field inspections, that's so critical for us, especially when we get into litigation. If we don't do our job well and document the things that we do, the chances are the city is going to lose that case in Pottawatomie County courts, and that's not something that any of us want to have. We want to be able to document it exactly as it happened. Legal and search warrants and things like that, those are things that Dick and I and Greg will work with, the 3 of us, and with the council to come up with the most appropriate legal mechanism to do the job that we need to do. The fee structures, as we went through, it was $56.50 a unit. The thought process that I had going through this is to do a rental registration fee on a biennial basis, starting with dwelling units at $100 for a 2-year period, which would drop you to $50 a year, less than what the average is across the state of Iowa, but more than most cities in Iowa. We are the 7th largest city in the state, and quite frankly, I think that we deserve to have our residents treated that way. So I look at $100, I'm throwing these numbers out strictly to you as averages across the state. Multifamily, boy, they run the gambit across the state as far as charges, from $7 a unit to $17 a unit, $100 up front plus a cost per unit. The average that we ran into that we thought was acceptable initially is $100 and $34 a unit. We added things in that we don't have now. Late fees for non-registration. We have $1 a day for a maximum of a month. That's the late fee that's in your fee schedule to charge in the city of Council Bluffs. So we added $50 per month per dwelling unit if they don't register it every year. If we catch somebody with a rental unit that's non-registered, we recommend that we go to $1,000 a year for that non-registered unit. For a single-family fee, now F, G, and H that I'm going to tell you, these will apply only to individuals who we catch that are non-registered or that fail to register in a timely manner, if they run past the due date and go that route. We thought a $200 a year registration fee versus $100 a year for those individuals would be an acceptable penalty to pay for what they've done, and that it would apply for a 3-year period. We do not have a fee for re-inspections for the first inspection. We will ask you to look at a $50 per inspection re-inspection fee. Subsequent inspections past the second re-inspection would be $100, and then a $250 Board of Appeals fee to apply for a waiver of housing restrictions. Every resident that gets a citation or goes to the zoning board or planning department or the building department, you have a right to appeal a decision. And we all have uniform fees that we have as fees to allow us to make application to those boards, and that would be consistent with what you have on other boards. So that's about it that I have picked up that I think you might be interested in discussing.
And then staff, what, talked, 3 inspectors, but you also need a tech.
2 inspectors and a tech.
2 and tech.
We have 1 on staff right now.
So you'd add 1, or
We
you're
would
adding
add
2?
2, sir.
That's a total of 3.
Total of 3.
What is a tech?
Plus
What's the
a tech.
difference?
Permit technician is the hub of activity in the office. What they would be responsible for, Lynn, would be to, if you got a complaint, we had to send out certified letters, we had to start a file. You would be responsible for keeping that documentation in order, so I keep my inspectors out in the field, rather
Okay.
than having them coming in and doing the downloads of the computer data from the fields, updating records, all
Okay,
that
so
office
for
work that
admin
needs to be
time.
done. It's an
Yeah.
administrative type
Got
of
it.
position.
Okay.
And you were talking back in Hannafin's day, 134,000 or somewhere in that neighborhood. With the new fees, what do you think it's gonna generate in total, and will it cover the cost?
Depending on how much you, the council, choose to make those fees, with the fees that I've provided to you, and I provided this to you earlier in the year sometime, I don't know when it was, sir, but those fees, I think, will probably generate, based on the numbers that I came up with today, somewhere between $450,000 to $590,000 in fees generated, potentially.
And in addition to staff, we need vehicles.
That is correct. We'd need vehicles, we need office supplies, we would need desks for them, cameras, things that inspectors need to have in the field and in the office.
So it's like a self-sustaining program then?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, in our conversation, I think you indicated that isn't there a state law that requires then that the funds generated through the program stay in the program? Is that what I
I
understood?
believe that's true, ma'am.
Okay, and so, once the program were to be put in place, if it looked like the fees that were being collected were more than it required to run the program, then the fees could be backed off if necessary. I mean, we would have a way of really accounting for whether or not, because all I really want is for the program to sustain itself. It should not be an income generator.
No.
It should be something that we only collect what it takes to do the program. So that would be really important to me, that it were documented and kept completely separate and just use it to sustain the program.
There's a true accounting of the money that will go into the program and out of the program.
I would concur with that. I think it's important that taxpayers generally aren't subsidizing any business, and not to pick on landlords, but I just don't think they should subsidize any business. So that seeing it self-sustaining, as your numbers show, is also very important to me.
One of the things I learned from a real wise man that I used to work for was that in the inspection industry, 85% of your costs should be borne by the fees that are generated in the permits and inspections department. 15% of what we do is ancillary costs that are away from the code that we're enforcing and should be borne by the public in general. That gentleman was S.B. Benson. He used to be the mayor. He wasn't. He was a city administrator in Bellevue, but he was a good man.
I might ask if maybe, Art, this may involve some analysis from you as well before the meeting. Mentioned that the city of Dubuque, slightly, a few thousand less in population, they have 5 inspectors. They have no fees for their inspection program. I'd like to kind of have you take a look at the internals for city of Dubuque and see, so what are they shifting around in order to make that work? I kind of like to take a look at that, because in fairness to the landlords, they're also paying a much higher property tax rate than is the average homeowner. So they end up supporting the city more so than most residential users. So I don't want to double up on what they're paying to run their business.
Yes, sir.
Only on properties that are 3 units or more, right?
Well, those are the only ones that received any sort of property tax relief under last year's legislation. Currently, any,
If you own a single-family residence as a rental property, you pay the exact same as if you,
no,
What?
oh, you don't have,
no
you don't have the
homestead.
homestead, yeah.
no.
But the rate, the percentage is
The percentage is the
residential.
same. They're just not getting a homestead.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
Though
Which is designed for a homeowner to get a discount, it's not.
but the difference
If I
in
own 2 homes, one a vacation home on Manawa, I wouldn't get a homestead on both, so.
What's the difference, though? Sorry to interrupt. What's the difference between
Couple
homestead and non?
$100.
A couple hundred per year?
Yeah.
but they're paying a much higher percentage on that property. So we're not just talking about the difference between a residential property and a homestead exemption.
Carla's
They-
nodding yes, but I don't know that
There-
that's true.
What would that be, besides the homestead exemption, what would that be, do you know?
Wasn't that just lowered to
90.
from 90 down to about,
On multifamily.
on a
Only on
multifamily?
multifamily. Only on multifamily.
Indeed, though, there are definitely 2 sides to that argument. The other side of it is other businesses are paying nearly 100% of their valuations.
Right,
So,
and I think-
so landlords do have a pretty good deal compared to every other business
Well,
in that sense.
If they're not the multi-residential units, then I think the current rate's about 90%.
What was the
that's right.
breakdown? You had mentioned, I don't think I wrote it down,
There are
though.
a single-family unit,
Units,
they're
multifamily
paying the
versus
residential rate.
homes that are rented.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Lynn, I have that
Without a
information, but I
rollback.
did not compile it. I can
They
get
get
that for you
advantage of the
relatively
rollback.
easy, though.
I'm just wondering, what is
They
the
benefit
largest
from the
percentage?
rollback, Al.
The largest,
Not the
what?
homestead.
The largest percentage of rentals, are they homes?
single-family dwellings.
They are, okay.
Yes.
So my concern on this, I mean, I understand where it's coming from, but right when we started off, 4 of the 5 were unregistered as far as the deaths. The pictures you showed us, I have no doubt that probably occurred during a rental, not from the landlord obviously providing that way. I guess my concern is this really gonna solve, like, if the fees are even higher, granted, there's a higher chance of getting caught than you're gonna have this high fee if you don't register, but just to start with, those that are already taking the chance on the system, now we're making an even higher fee with stricter requirements. I mean, I would almost think it would make it worse as far as unregistered rental units.
The good thing about having a permit technician that would be dealing solely with paperwork is that I can allocate that resource to investigate Potawatomi County records so that we can try to find those people that are skirting the law. By no means are we going to establish a way that we can get 100% compliance. But if we actively investigate and evaluate those homes that potentially are, I think in the long run it will provide a safer property for all of the renters and for the citizens of Council Bluffs.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that perspective. I guess my question then is, you mentioned before, you know that you have some bad actors, good expression, I guess, for those that are currently registered. The case that you showed us, we had a recent case involving a smoke alarm that the city knew wasn't there. I guess my question is, in what respect is the self-inspection program not currently working for registered landlords that we need to undo that and go to something else? I agree that we ought to be actively seeking out, and I think we do have all the authority that we need under current code to go out and look for those unregistered and wrongdoers. I guess my question is, so what's failing in the self-inspection program that we can't otherwise do that?
Sir, we find throughout the inspection process, and you have to understand that we get inspections based on complaints. I don't have the staff to actively send people out and actively look for these problems unless we physically drive by and see something, but typically that's on another department. That would be outside the house, and that would be probably in the health department's area. But when we get complaints, we go in, and that's when we find a large percentage of the violations. We come back, we find the self-certification form, and if they've given us false information on that form, we proceed accordingly. So every time we get a complaint that comes in, that's one thing we're pulling out, is that self-certification form and evaluating what the landlord provided to us as their qualification for self-certification.
I think the question was, does that form not match the conditions? So you pull the form
On a
and
more
there's a
regular
variance.
basis than not.
I'm sorry?
On a more regular basis than not.
From
I don't have
landlord
a-
problems, though, you think?
I don't
or
have a
tenant?
percentage for you folks with regards to that, but it happens on a regular basis.
And the variances are something that the landlord has control over, not a bad tenant?
The variances?
If there's something in the inspection that doesn't match the self-inspection, is that particular variance or discrepancy something that the landlord has control over or the tenant?
Well, and therein lies a part of the problem, and I think this case that I showed you is a perfect example of a tenant-generated problem. I can't believe any landlord would rent that house to somebody in that condition.
Right.
So it's very plausible that the rental inspection or the self-certification on that house was compliant. I have no way of knowing that because we weren't in the house prior to those tenants taking occupancy. But to answer your question, the discrepancy is something that we're going to witness firsthand. And if we go back and we find that the landlord checked off that they had smoke detectors and they didn't have smoke detectors, we're going to investigate, was it the landlord that didn't provide smoke detectors, or did the tenant take them down so he could put the batteries in his kid's iPod, which we see a lot of.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay. So I guess that brings me back to my question then. What I'm hearing from your initial response is that this perhaps is more than a manpower problem than it is a failure in the self-inspection system.
I could make a case on both ways, Al, to be quite honest with you. I think for the larger portion of the landlords that try very hard to provide quality rental programs, they struggle trying to make those things compliant just so they can bring them in, and they've told me that before. There's other ones where they come in and they just check down, they sit out here in the hallway and fill out their form and sign it and turn it in. I mean, I've seen that every day during those 3 or 4 months where we've got landlords rushing in to pay their fee and get out of here before they have to go back to work. So I see both things happening, and I don't really have a good qualified, consistent answer for you on that.
Okay.
That issue may end up being academic in the sense of, unless I'm mistaken, I looked, we're the only one, unless I missed something, of the 10 largest cities in the state to interpret the state requirement of a rental inspection program to be met by a self-inspection. I think the other 9 disagree with us, as does, quite frankly, my own reading of that law. And I'm concerned that, we could potentially not be compliant with our obligations under state law. So whether we want to do it or not, I'm not sure that's the question. I wonder if we're required to do it. And reading it, I think we are. And I've got a lot of various legal concerns about not having it.
Is there a state-generated complaint in that regard?
I'm not aware of that. I know there's a state statute, and off the top of my head, I forget the threshold, but cities above, I think it's 15,000, have to have a rental inspection program, and we're the only one of the top 10 in size that doesn't have a, I'm sorry, what did you call it, Steve?
Active
An
program?
active. And so I have some concerns whether that meets. It may very well meet state law, but 9 jurisdictions in the state, sister jurisdictions, appear to disagree with us. And so that carries a lot of weight with me. 9 out of 10.
Dick, I'm sure you've looked into this, yeah?
Yeah, we, it's probably the minimal way of complying with the city code, or the state code. I think technically it does comply with state code. I mean, no city has ever come out and said, no, that's, self-inspection's not good enough. They've just started a program of doing it a different way. At Ames, I think the fire department does most of the housing inspections, or they used to. In Council Bluffs, we just had an extremely difficult time getting the program off the ground. And we initially did have a program where we had, I think, at least 2 housing inspectors. There was a game plan to inspect every unit at that time, every 7 years.
At an estimate, because both Dick and I and Roger were involved, at an estimated 5,400 rental units, with 2 inspectors, we estimated that we could inspect on a complaint basis, and then on a 7-year rotation would get to each of those 5,400. What we're finding out is we underestimated the number by half, so.
So I guess that brings me back to the self-inspection concept. If there's not enough inspectors, I guess, to do this on a faster pace, and we know that some landlords are compliant and generally do a good job with this, can we do something to, I guess, recognize the fact that they're in good standing and give them a break, not only perhaps on the active inspections, but also on the fee structures? In other words, we're providing an incentive for doing well.
Well, Al, I can tell you from personal experience, it takes a heck of a lot less time to walk through a compliant house and ensure that it complies as opposed to a house that doesn't. So their inspection time is greatly reduced. They'll be on a 3-year, excuse me, a 3-year cycle at the least for those, unless the council can come up with some alternate mechanism that works for them. And I do implore you to provide financial incentives to be compliant for those folks. I think that makes good sense. They shouldn't be penalized financially for being good landlords.
Well, and I think they are being penalized right now for being good landlords, in that they're paying a fee to inspect their own property, $17, or is it 15 or $15 to inspect their own property. And they come in, they register, they pay the fee, the good ones do the inspection, and it takes time. I went and did the inspection process on an apartment complex, and it took a long time, and it was a compliant property, very well maintained. While our problem landlords, who have always been problem landlords, they don't do the inspection, and I can tell you they don't. I mean, I know of cases where they literally checked all the boxes, put it on the copy machine, ran the copies, and then filled the address in at the top. We know what's going on. So, they're still skating by, and I don't know any other way to do this. And one of the questions I had is on the ones where you guys are only inspecting right now on a complaint basis,
Correct.
right? So if I'm in one of the worst, we all kind of know where some of those are at, the really bad ones. Do you get very many complaints from those? Because my suspicion would be that those tenants aren't gonna complain because they don't wanna get evicted. So how well could this complaint process possibly work? You know, I'm very suspicious of that, because I'm thinking if I'm in a really cruddy rental property and it's all I can afford and I don't want to get evicted, I actually am renting from a landlord that doesn't ask any questions, doesn't want to know where my income came from, doesn't want to know how I make a living, doesn't do a background check, I probably pay a little extra for that, and I'm not going to risk it by complaining.
Well, you see that in Steve's example, the toilet doesn't work. Why wouldn't he call the landlord to complain to come fix the toilet? Because
He doesn't want him to see
doesn't
that
want him
property.
in the property.
Darn right.
If I may piggyback on that too, in my experience, a lot of working with neighborhoods, a lot of the neighbors, and I think that's important. Not only do we have the business owners of the landlords in the neighborhoods, but the other 50,000 people in the community who are living in, roughly 50,000, are living in they're owning or buying their property, living next door, in many cases within 15 feet, because we have our side yards tend to be very small and we're an older town. They have to live right next to something that's very unsafe, and a lot of times people don't have the money or wherewithal to move, and they shouldn't have to. And so I think we need to remember them too. And when talking to them, a lot of times they don't make complaint, and what I'm about to say is not a criticism of the office, it's criticism of how few are allocated to your office. You're so busy that it takes a while sometimes to get to it. I know there's a triage of, the most important. I'm not saying anything different, but people have generally sworn off, they tell me, complaining because they're just too many problems for you to deal with under the current system. And I have a hard time, if somebody's got to bear the cost of adding more folks in the office, which I think we desperately need to enforce the law, for the sake of everybody, the good landlords so they don't get undercut, and the neighbors so that they don't have to live next to it. And their investment, their family's life is just as important. Who's got to pay for that? Does the business pay for that? Or does the general taxpayer pay for that? And it kind of reminds me in my profession, I have to pay several hundred, actually close to, well, probably low thousands a year into funds through the Supreme Court of the state to pay for bad lawyers, their funds to pay when they steal money and so forth. I have to fund as a profession the people in my profession who don't give us a good name, and so that the people are bailed out by the bad ones, which I'd like to say are very, very few of the lawyers, just like landlords, just like any job. But we have to bear it. I mean, if the general taxpayer in the state had to pay for lawyers, bad lawyers, people would be up in arms, and I don't think they'd like it any better if I know as a resident of the city, if I have to subsidize a business, I don't get it, because it seems to me the business, that's a cost of doing business. If you're a good one, which the vast majority are, you're not going to do anything different than you are now, but you're not going to get undercut. It seems to me that particularly if we focus on that, particularly the non-compliant and the non-registered ones, which there are a lot. I know a lot of us live in parts of the community that are older. That tends to be where that happens, and there are a lot. And we need to do something about it.
Can we set, like, in each one of those quadrants you were talking about, if we were to do this, could you set a thing where if there had been more than, say, 2 complaints on a particular property, that those properties that have gotten the most complaints in that quadrant then would be the first ones to be inspected? Because if truly that and the ones that aren't registered and haven't registered do that in the first phase of it, I mean, is that something we can do?
Certainly. In my thought process, to do that brings them down to an annual inspection. So they're getting 3 times the inspection on their property as a good landlord would be.
Can you explain the process that you would use to do the inspection compared to what the landlords are using right now, so we would understand that process?
We're going to use exactly the same form that the landlords are required to fill out right now for the self-inspection checklist. If it was good enough for us to provide them to do, I see no reason why it's not good enough for us to use the same exact process.
Okay. And then I mentioned this to you earlier today. If we were to do something like this, I would like to see a registry online so that, the landlords that have properties that are certified, that are good properties, that anybody looking to rent can go on there and be sure, yeah, it's certified, it's a good property. At least we know it's being inspected and it's registered. We can't guarantee anything, but I would like to know, I know other communities have done it, and I guess I would like to see that on there. And also, I think it helps too if a neighbor says, well, there's a rental next door, I don't even know if they're registered, they could go on the site and check and see.
Certainly, we could do that.
Okay.
When we've talked about this at past sessions, we noted that this is a considerable undertaking to go on and modify the existing code and set up the logistics to possibly make this happen. And there was recognition at that time that there would be a need to go out and consult with the landlord groups and get their feedback and opinion. I don't think that discussion has taken place yet to date. Is there a time frame? Is there a plan to go out?
I think I get them Thursday night at Hy-Vee, maybe.
Well,
I guess I would like to see, the ordinance hasn't, I think what I heard Mr. Carmichael say earlier is the ordinance has not been rewritten, so there hasn't been anything brought forward. I guess is that the starting point? It has to be rewritten. We don't know what we would be discussing until we see a rewrite of that ordinance.
Exactly, that
You
is
have to
correct.
see a draft, and that would give folks a chance to look at what the potential change would be, and I do think, yeah, then we should talk
And
about
an
it.
ordinance change is public hearing,
Right.
so
Yep.
there would be definite public input.
Or,
But it doesn't
separate
hurt, it doesn't
meeting.
hurt to have a couple public forums about it.
Well, yeah, because it's such an extensive topic,
Yeah.
there's way more time that would need to be allotted to this subject.
No, I
Than-
agree.
than
I
right
think that's
here.
appropriate, yeah.
I would not hesitate to ask the mayor, is there any way you would be considered doing a committee, to get this ball rolling as far as what needs to be done, that would include maybe a representative from the landlord's, fire department, police department, because there are a lot of different entities involved in the safety of Council Bluffs citizens, so.
Well, and I think Steve alluded to it with his first sentences. It's a high public relations is keyed to the implementation, but
well,
I am talking to the Landlords Association some night this week. I don't have my phone with me, but
Well, I'd like to see neighborhood, maybe the president of the neighborhood associations involved at
Yes.
some level, just try to see if we can't get a good cross-section of the people that are affected by it and put together a committee. Because it would take a long time if we just kept holding open forums. That's not where the work's gonna get done. I wanna have the forums, but as far as the work goes, getting it into a workable format, I think that's where a committee with reps would be helpful.
well, I think a good example, we have obviously a handful of landlords sitting out here tonight, or today, I should say. Dan, I'll just let you be like, I'm gonna ask you a question, just because you're sitting in the front. Would you, do you think that'd be helpful if you had a chance to come and kind of talk about some of these ideas and be able to give input? Do you have any?
Well, you want me to stand up?
Actually, I think you do have to stand up the
Yeah.
thing, don't you? So you can hear him.
Yes.
and let's not get a
Yeah, not long, just like a quick, do you think that'd be?
Well, I think that when we set up this self-inspection, we met with the city, we worked it all out that way. To do something to blindside us, I'm not in favor of that. I think you can get a lot more by working together with us, especially when the not self-inspection, but the inspection office, 50% or close to of what they inspect are owner occupied. So you're talking about funding the whole inspection process with our funds when 50% of what they're doing is owner occupied. So how are you going to,
That
And
actually
those are all
wasn't the
the-
question, though. Her question was regarding the
Would-
committee that we're talking about.
yes, and I said that would be great, that we would
Okay.
meet together and work on that.
Okay.
And Steve, I think when I asked earlier about, keeping the program self-contained financially, and I guess I would have thought that that would have meant when we're off doing this other thing, which is minimal housing, that's outside of the rental inspection program, those funds would be accounted for and those costs would be accounted for on a different line item and wouldn't come out of the same funds that we're using to do rental inspections, would it? I mean, if in fact the state law said you have to keep that as a separate program,
I'd have to talk to Art about that. I couldn't speak to that.
well, that would be really important to me. I don't want housing inspections for homeowner occupied properties. That shouldn't come out of rental inspection program, and that's why it's just really important to me. I think the program's important, and I've said, and I think everybody here knows, that's something I want to see done. But it's really important to me that we are able to go back then after a year and evaluate it and say, hey, you know what, that program only cost, $250,000 to implement. So I want those fees back down, because my biggest thing about this is I don't want it to become so expensive, because I know for a fact, if you're a good landlord, what's happening is by the time you pay, if you have a mortgage on it, your insurance, which goes up every year, your property taxes, which just keep going up. By the time you pay all of that, if you're putting money back into the property to maintain it, there is not a big profit margin there. So this is going to cost, there's no way it's going to be done without there being some money involved. I'm pretty sure of that. But my big thing is going to be, I want those numbers as low as we can have them and still have an effective program. So
Agree.
that would be my direction, as far as what it's going to take for me to be able to support that. But I think what Steve needs today probably is, do we want him to move forward with rewriting that ordinance? And
We've got to have something to
Drafting
talk
it.
about, I think.
I don't know how we can.
I think that's the first step, and then the fee structure. I totally agree that the landlords who are compliant should be somehow incentivized to remain that way, so it doesn't add an undue cost. Because I think the focus here are the landlords that don't work within the system and are providing a dangerous place for residents to live, and nobody deserves to live in that environment.
And so, just to paraphrase for Steve, and you correct me where I'm wrong, you estimated about 80 hours of work time to craft that ordinance, and if there isn't some intent on all the parties involved to move forward, there's really no sense in having him do that, and so I guess I'm kind of looking for
Well,
consensus. Do you want to move away from the passive program to an active program?
Yes.
I'm a yes. You got 3 nodding yes.
Yes, I want an active program. This is, what we've got right now is really kind of silly. A good landlord's always going to inspect their property and take care of it, and the bad ones still don't care. I don't see how a self-inspection program has really changed anything at all.
And we can't make a law based on status. We can make it on behaviors. What I mean by that is, we can't make a law saying, Joe, this landlord fee applies to you, but Bob, it doesn't apply to you. How could you objectively, constitutionally, come up with a way to the difference between the two guys? But if based on their behavior, one's continually or almost always complying, doing his best, and the other one isn't, well, then you can treat them differently and completely reasonably. And so we got to remember that. And I don't want, we need to enforce this for the sake of everybody, the tenants, the people living next door, which is the majority of the community, and I think for the good landlords who are getting undercut. The only way, who's going to pay for those inspectors? Well, I think it ought to come from the business that benefits.
Well, and considering that it was mentioned earlier, which I was not aware of this, so of the top 10 largest cities, we're the only one that has this kind of inspection program. And if it's not what the law intended, I don't want to wait until someone does file a suit against the city. I want to get on that and move to the program that we should have. And I would hope that the ordinances that are out there in the other 9 cities, maybe they have sections that we can, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can copy, paste, tailor to our needs, but I think we should move forward.
If I may, my suggestion, based on similar language in the code, I'd encourage you to look to Cedar Rapids. They seem to have a similar, granted they're 3 times the size, 2.5 times the size of us, but most of what they've got seems to fit more with our city than, say, the city of Des Moines. Their program seems completely unreal for a city our size.
And just covering my legal backside, I just want to make it clear that when we, Roger, I, Dick, and multiple other people sat down, we had no rental inspection program. We were required by law to have one. And Hannafin said, we don't have the money to do it. We can't afford to do it. And I said, and we can't afford to get sued if somebody gets killed in a fire.
Right.
And say that we just ignored the law. And
Yeah.
so, on Dick's advice, I think that it does comply with the law, the
Okay.
self-inspection. But is it the best solution? That's up to you to decide.
Yeah, I just don't want a lawsuit coming out of, now this is on televised, it's gonna be in the paper and.
Well, that's why I wanted to
Yeah.
make that point, because I
Okay.
don't want people to say, yeah, they just sat up there and said their program doesn't comply with the law, and then an accident happened, because I think it does comply with the law.
Okay,
It
all right.
probably does, but it's arguable, and I don't want to have that lawsuit and defend it.
Well, at a minimum for process, if we're in agreement that we need to go out and get some feedback from the landlord community and from the neighborhood associations, which seems to be very prudent, then while we're working off of a draft, it would be at that point a rough draft subject to revision. So we need to get that feedback before we come back and put anything on the agenda. So this process may take a little while to get it right.
Do you think you could have a draft back within 30 days? Just an initial draft?
No. You're talking about a lot of people coming together.
No.
No, we don't want to develop a draft and just throw it out there. I think we want to get the group together first.
That's what I
Talk
think.
about it, and evolve a draft pilot. I don't want Steve to develop something, throw it out there, and everybody just rips it.
Right.
Well, no, here's the thing though, if you don't have a draft to start with, I don't know how we can have a meeting of a committee to start putting it together. We have to have some idea of what the initial,
You can use excerpts from existing
Well,
law.
we have the we use the International Building Code, right, basically.
Yes, sir.
I think something that, that's
That
important.
written out would be helpful.
Again, I think we said this, you said it as one of your first points, is the PR portion of it. I think if we just do this draft and say, this is our draft, it's not gonna go over nearly as well as if we have some sort of a town hall or a committee, or however we wanna do it, I don't care how we do it. But we need to have those that it's gonna impact the most involved, whether it's, a
Well, you know
small
you're
group
gonna
of
use the
them
same
or,
inspection sheet.
right.
Right.
Oh,
But-
you're gonna use inspectors, the kind of the fill in the blanks is how often is it gonna happen, what's the associated cost?
So it's basically the
I
ordinance.
think Sharon's right, we need to have a starting point at least
Yeah.
for.
it'd just be really hard for me to sit down, and say, well, this is what I think, when I don't have anything in my hand to say, this is how it would get
You all
implemented.
aren't going to see it until after the committee's reviewed it. I think you have to ask people for guidance as you develop a policy.
I agree.
But if you don't have any expertise in what the statutes have to read or should read, what,
That can be guided by Steve.
Well, in the International Building Code, I did notice that it did have input from the various, I'm going to get the words wrong, so excuse me, the councils or the different organizations that promulgate, like, for example, the International Plumbing Code or the International Electrical Code and so forth. I noticed in that International Building Code, in front of the model law, it had a little bracketed and then the letter of which committee it came from. So naturally, the sections dealing with plumbing came from experts, the International Plumbing Code, whoever promulgates that. And I apologize, I don't remember. That's what we've got now, and I printed it out, and it's about 61 pages, single-spaced. And so that's what we currently ask landlords, good landlords, to do themselves. And it's a law school final is what it is, and it's really hard to understand. What we have right now is, and the language of, say, a Cedar Rapids or somebody, how they make that into a program, they're all kind of similar, really.
So we could use that as a base then.
So, Scott, and I take very much Greg's point that, there may very well be something, let's say plumbing's the only one that comes to mind, that locally we'd want to change. But, the Model Act must have some basis in rationality, or whoever promulgates it presumably knows a lot about plumbing, and we got to start somewhere. So why don't we have that and then talk about it?
Well, I think we're not gonna mess with what the plumbing standards are or the electrical standards are. What we're dealing with is the administration.
Right.
Indeed.
Right.
Yep.
Yes.
And I took the time to look at the Bukes while we were talking here. And they don't have an inspection fee, but they do have a registration fee, which is the same thing we have. We do not have an inspection fee. You have to register your unit annually. In the Bukes is $12 per building, $12 per unit. So if you got a duplex, I assume that's $36 for a year. But your initial inspection, there's no cost. If there's a re-inspection fee, or you have to re-inspect, then there are additional costs that are piled on. I think it would be beneficial to have some public input before we try to address this administration thing, to make sure that we don't go down a path that we're gonna get just bombarded with in the process.
I think we're gonna get bombarded. I mean, I'm under no disillusion that this is gonna be an easy process, that everybody's gonna be happy and everybody's gonna love it. But I do believe it needs to be an active program, and I think that we can all work together to try to get there. So if we're not gonna do a draft first, then I guess I would ask the mayor, would you please appoint a committee within the next 7 days and have them meet within the next 30 days? Because what's gonna happen is that 2 years from now, we have talked about this, 3 years, 4 years?
At least.
At least, and nothing. We don't ever get any forward momentum. So let's just go ahead and get some kind of a committee set up, get the meeting started, get the people involved that are gonna, represent the different groups so that they can go back at their meetings and talk to the people involved in their groups so that they can bring thoughtful input forward as to what it needs to look like.
But, and again, I want to be very clear. I believe that it needs to be an active program, and I doubt very much I'll be swayed from that. And this is not based just on my own opinion, but it's based on talking to a lot of residents in the community, indeed a lot of landlords in the community. They're not happy with it, but a lot of folks I talk to understand where it's coming from. I mean, I wouldn't be happy with any fees. I'm not happy with the fees I have to pay in my own line of work, but I have to pay them. It's the cost of doing business. Everybody else does. So I doubt very much I'll be swayed from that. And so I just want to be very clear. Kicking the can down the road, if I have any say about it, we're not going to do that again this year. We're going to do something.
All right, thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Thanks.
For purposes of administrative clarity, and I don't know if this falls into your bailiwick, Dick, but in looking over the website, I noticed that Title 17 of the city code, there's major gaps in what's posted online that can be pulled up and looked at by landlords and tenants. For instance, it doesn't mention that we're currently operating under the 2009 edition of the International Property Maintenance Code. Chapter 13, on the other hand, says that we're still operating under the 2003 International Residential Code, the 2003 International Building Code, and the 2003 International Property Maintenance Code, which of course is not correct because that was changed in Title 17. So those references need to be incorporated and updated.
Definitely.
That's a true point.
Reviewing
Very
the-
good.
This
Very
whole
good.
process, we'll get into that and clean it up.
Thank you.
Good kid. Anything else? All right, let's go to the agenda. Anything in the consent agenda that the council has questions or concerns regarding?
I need to abstain on F. Your appointment is a family member, so I'm not able
Okay.
to vote on that.
so pull that out and vote on that separately.
Didn't know you were late.
Anything else on the consent agenda?
No.
Anything on the public hearings?
Okay, so, D. Nate, I got multiple emails from you. I'm
Yeah,
still
my
trying to
apologies.
figure out, this seems,
I
help me.
could not follow.
Yeah, I wasn't the only one
I'm
then.
not,
I thought it was.
I'm not, I'm sure I
to know
could
the
have,
property
you
a
have to
little
know the
bit.
property, and I'm
Yeah.
not very
Okay.
good with directions, so that's even worse.
Is there, yeah, I said you,
Yeah, I need more information before I can actually vote on this.
it makes
Yeah.
more sense if you know.
It really does.
The map is
I-
very, that's the only way I can understand it
Well, there,
myself.
and there wasn't really a map
Not
in the packet.
From your side,
no.
but from the
Unless you had a
resident
map in
side,
your-
the email.
there
was
wasn't
Well, I
mine.
know that.
Oh.
I know the property, so that's the difference, yeah, if you didn't know the property.
I was just trying to visualize based on the information, and there's no
I'm gonna have my
map,
cake
and
and eat it.
I gave up.
The discussion,
That's too
we had a
frustrating.
discussion for
Thank you.
several hours one day, and they presented several different varieties of options, is the way I'd put it.
Yeah, you have to kind of get a feel for the,
All right.
like when, well, there's background, I mean, should we?
Well, there was a house there,
There
right?
used to be cuts way back when at one point right into these, and then when they redid the street, that's when the problem started, or no?
Well, when
that-
Kingsville was put in,
Yeah.
the three house, or two of the houses on Kingsville lost their direct access to Kingsville.
Okay.
And so they were.
Yeah, you gotta point out that they were compensated.
Right.
Oh, yeah,
I'm just
they-
trying to get
they
background
were
as to how
paid.
this all like.
And it ran with
They
the
got,
land.
they were compensated for it.
Yeah, and
Oh,
it
okay.
Just
was,
as background as to what.
they got paid, but then the land, loses it forever.
So then, parcel 108, we acquired through a 67A process, tore the house down. We saw as an opportunity to get access to those two houses that were.
And is this Kingsville, Dick, on the bottom?
Yeah,
Yes, yes.
and that's Harrison, and that's,
And
Okay.
Roger Goff is one of the property owners. He has the house at 120 Harrison, and he also has the house on 20 Kingsville Boulevard.
Okay.
I have tried to put a process together here where we can get access to everybody get additional ground onto their lots, and it's just become very, very difficult. The big issue is on the easement strip down the middle, which is 6 foot off each side of the center line of that split lot. It's a fairly expensive process to get that hard surfaced and all the way back to service this lot and this lot. I was trying to get something with the property owners where they would agree to all contribute to that. The owner of 201 refused to participate in that. And so at this point, what I'm proposing, and I think Roger's on board with most of it, Roger has a lot in the 800 block of First Avenue. He would like to swap that lot with this lot, with the understanding that he would be obligated to sell what I've marked in the red, which is just south of the easement line, but essentially transfer that to 24 Kingsville Boulevard. That's Helen Dreyer, is it? I think.
And that's the 11111 square feet?
yeah.
And he would,
Okay.
in the letter, I've got a proposed price on that, and those are the prices we're gonna be talking. It's on the last page, it's the last exhibit. It would be that, just the $2 per square foot parcel, so they would not be acquiring the easement portion. On the lot back here, the 201, what I'm proposing is that, as part of the consideration, Roger would grant the city an option to purchase that parcel in blue, which is just south of the easement line, and also have an easement all the way out to Harrison, and that would be for an established price. Essentially the same price that we were talking about, the numbers in there. We would have then the ability for the next 10 years to essentially assign that option to a future owner of 201 so that they would have access.
But it's only for 10 years, though.
Yeah, 10 years is what I'm proposing.
Can't really ask more than that.
Okay.
Does that understand
But I hear
you,
what you're
Roger?
saying.
Sure.
It's unfortunate. We have a situation in which all but one landowner agrees, and the other landowner does have some proposals, some more likely than others, but the other landowners aren't agreeable, so.
So the owner at 201 North First, they're gonna continue to have access. They're
Well-
not gonna have access at all.
No,
They don't have access right
Well,
now.
there are a lot of, there's some question of whether on the ground people are doing it anyway, but legally they don't have access.
Right.
Right,
Yeah.
yes.
It's the best way I
should
can
have phrased
answer.
it
It's the
differently.
that's
best
what
way I
11
can
don't
answer
have
that.
legal.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the owner of 20 could put up a fence if
Yeah,
they
we own
wanted
that
to
whole
until such a
657
time as
A. It was
that
a
easement
house. I
had to
think
be
the
open.
garage
Because he'll get hit that extra,
I would think so,
whatever,
yeah.
yeah.
The off guys.
Well,
This
Only
would
an
be very
option.
confusing.
Slide it off.
No, because who's buying the part that's 24, right?
Yeah.
Owner of 24, 120 it depends on who.
20,
Not anything else we're gonna do.
Mr.
with
Goff
such
owns
a
20 and 120.
long,
Right.
narrow lot. Well,
So if he
it is
wanted to
narrow,
put a
40
fence up
feet.
at 20 on the west side of that lot,
Oh,
he
right.
could certainly do that. And we wouldn't be prohibiting.
Oh, without this, you mean? Without this? What
Well, yeah,
we're
he
gonna
could
try
do
to
that. I mean,
today.
we only have an option. If the city doesn't ever use that option, then it's still his.
Right,
Well,
yeah.
They would, but that's Roger's lot, so if he wanted to sell that off, they'd have their own access and.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And you know, a question I had in the process is why does the road take a little bit of a jog? There's a storm drain right directly in front of it, so I don't even want to know how much that costs to, if those can even be moved.
Greg wasn't willing to move it, so.
So if you have to ask, you can't afford it?
Yeah, if
Okay.
you have to ask, you can't afford it, that's fine.
I figured as much, yeah.
This works.
Okay, that's much more clear now, thank you.
All right. Questions on the public hearings and additional questions?
Let's see. No.
Resolutions, resolution.
Is that the one we're going into executive session about? Or,
Yes.
okay,
Rescind.
I guess I'll wait.
And then, applications, permits and cancellation, applications for permits and cancellations.
It's nice to see a parade down in the 100 block. That'll be,
Yeah,
that's
That'll
so
be
cool.
neat. That is
Very
Yeah.
happy with that.
And I know
Kinda
that took a lot of work on both sides' parts, so thanks to everybody that did participate in making that happen.
That was your idea?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
It was not my idea.
It was Greg's idea. You're pointing fingers at each other.
There's a long story. Thank you though, to everybody that made that happen.
It's a great, it's a great thing. That's great.
We've got it backwards.
It is a great thing. It's
Yeah, it'll be exciting.
exciting to see that block becoming more and more active every
Yeah.
year, and
Absolutely.
I like it.
All right, we'll see you at 7 o'clock.
Motion to go into closed session?
Second.
This is an appropriate topic for an executive session.
At Council Bluffs Savings Bank, we take pride in our community, volunteering our time to helping individuals, families, and businesses succeed. We are Council Bluffs people operating a Council Bluffs bank to help Council Bluffs be a better place to work and live. Hometown banking, the way it used to be.